Hi, good afternoon. This is Microsoft Office Hours, and I am David Perlman, Director for Education Solutions. With me is Matt Wade today. Today is April 23rd, and we have a great audience today. So I'm glad you could join us, Matt. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Dave. How are you?
Fantastic. No major complaints. We're going to learn a little bit about AI, chatbots, and how we can change the life of your organization through a little bit of AI and some fairly easy low code, no code chatbots. So, Matt, I'll leave it to you to make introductions and share your greatness with everybody.
Perfect. Thank you, Dave. So my name is Matt Wade. I am the VP of Client Engagement for a no-code chatbot solution called AppBot, built on top of the Microsoft Cloud. Most people generally know me from some infographics and work that I've done in the past, which is great because it's on the Office 365 side of things, but my day job is actually more on the AI side. So I help organizations build out chatbots and other business automation solutions, essentially, either on our platform or not. Most people, though, if they know me for anything, not that I expect them to know me, it's usually going to be for the periodic table of Office 365 or the Everyday Etiquette Microsoft Teams guide that I put together, which is sort of one of those, like, let's talk about brass tacks and how Microsoft Teams should really be used. But like I said, day-to-day for me is really the AI space. So I'm in the Azure side of things, generally building out natural language modeling, machine learning, things like that. And what it really brings us to is that, whether we're ready for it or not, we've definitely crossed into a new paradigm of human-machine interaction. And I'm not talking about like the Westworld style. You can't even tell it's fake. It's passed fully the Turing test. But this is more about business automation, being able to send anybody, whether it's a customer, whether it's a constituent, internal employee, student, whomever, and saying, hey, here's that central access point to go ask for that thing that you need. And that's really a new and different way to interact with things. I mean, for years we've had like phone trees and automatic, form types of things on websites, but now we're bringing in the ability to actually speak the way that we would converse naturally with a machine in this case. So when it comes down to it, what you're really doing is you're building a web application that can provide both knowledge and kick off actions. And the Azure space provides a lot of resources for being able to build this out. And it is actually super, super easy. I'm not a developer. I cannot code at all, but I am able to build out chatbots, especially on our platform since we use no code, but still being able to put out real world actual solutions. When it comes to the education space, usually, at least whenever we talk to our customers or a lot of times when I'm giving conference presentations, the hardest part of this topic is getting people over that hump of why would I even want this? Because they don't necessarily see either the use case or when would they ever want to do it in their real lives and what's the real connection to getting things done. But realistically, you go to websites now almost all the time, that little bottom right corner, you'll see a little button that either pops up a live agent or a bot. That's essentially what I'm talking about. The use cases clearly are there. If you're a Bank of America customer, you'll note that their bot Erica pops up all the time in the app. If you've gotten insurance from Geico recently, you might have gone through their bot called Katie. It's all over the place. And if these big organizations are investing in it, that means it's saving them money somehow. And the somehow is really being able to replace a lot of that repetitive, very automatable stuff that before the barrier to get into it was going to be natural language. Well, it's not a barrier any longer. So when it comes to either student interactions, faculty support, parent, and then internal customer service, so IT, facilities, finance, HR, any sort of customer service, tech support, or customer support type of experience can totally be brought into one of these chatbot experiences. That doesn't mean that you have to go off and build one major chatbot that does all of this stuff. In fact, that can be really difficult. Actually, what you might want to consider is to have sort of, cordoned off different bots that do specific things. So one that can be owned locally by, say, the finance or bursar to deal with questions about financing, payments, scholarships, things like that. And at risk of being, of completely breaking every single rule in slide design, talking in the general and vague terms is usually not that helpful for people, and I wanted to put together a bit of a listing here to actually give some inspiration to people in the education space as to what they might want to do. So putting a bot on your website to provide information to prospective students, maybe bring in videos and case studies or success stories from students to show off to those kids that are looking at potentially attending a college, university, school, whatever. Internal for students that are already attending. Let's say they need to put in a request for some facilities work in their dorm, or they want to put in a case for fixing the washing machines or something like that. All of those types of things are super easy to automate and also interact with and connect to the systems you're already using. So let's say that that washing machine is broken and you have a ticketing system. That chatbot, it doesn't matter whether the student knows it or not, but that chatbot can go and reach out to that system and say, hey, Matt Wade just requested a new ticket to be opened. He has these issues. Please submit this, and it can push that towards the right organization. Better yet, the bot could actually come back and say, hey, it sounds like you're having an issue with the washer dryer system. Did you try troubleshooting this, and this first? Because if you can actually prevent the ticket from even being created or at least assigned to a human, you just save that time by giving a student who, might be an entitled millennial like me, that maybe they're not so good with their hands and they didn't think to try to, do a couple things that could maybe fix it, perhaps a kick on the side, I don't know. But even with internal finance bursar, you want to ask about scholarships, you want to find out about tuition, make sure that your payments were accepted. You could send notifications. These bots aren't just I go to it. It can actually go to you if you give the bots connection through SMS and you have phone numbers to reach out to. You can keep parents informed, send them notifications perhaps if a bad grade comes through, or give them the ability to ask questions. This replaces that whole portal jumping that everybody has to do, where a parent might have to go into a grade portal, but then they may have to go into the LMS separately, and then separate from that is the bursar system. All of that stuff is all over the place, and a lot of people don't know where to get to things, so they depend on their bookmarks or other favorites, or maybe just an email they have to bring up every time because that's the way they find things. But if they just have one central place to go and they can say, hey, get me the information I want, that's going to be a major benefit. So as people go forward and build out these bots from the first time, generally you're going to see the knowledge aspect being a lot more common in the stepping stones for getting people started. The knowledgeable aspect there is really going to be static information. So if I look at this from a perspective of an IT help desk, that first question might be, what's the Wi-Fi password, right? That's generally going to be a static thing or only going to change every so often. That's easy to make within one of these cognitive services. The next step is going to be going off and doing actual action, perhaps lookups. That could be answering questions that are based on dynamic data, submitting things or opening requests. Those are more actionable things. So as organizations start diving into this, or just the people within those organizations start toying around with the new tools, the one thing I want to sort of get across is to not just settle at an FAQ bot. Just being able to answer static questions, while useful, definitely, is not even close to getting the most out of the technology. And you really want to look at this from an action-based orientation. Look at your business processes, the workflows, things that people do, the steps that they take to get things done, and try to see if you can find those high-value ones that people are annoyed by, they hate doing every Friday morning, and are reasonably easy to automate. So if you can get some of those, put them in that bot, expand the knowledge on the bot, that bot's now going to have a real reason for people to go to and actually be used. So when you want to go forward and you actually want to kick off and start building some of these things out, the architecture is pretty standard, actually. There's really a sort of a three-legged stool of good bot design. The first thing is you want to make sure that bot can understand what's coming into it. That's where that whole buzz phrase of natural language processing, NLP, comes in. Azure is going to offer you a couple different services for that. And then from that, the bot needs to either answer a question or kick off a process. And that process can answer a question as well, but it may necessarily have to go out and look up the information in a logical way. So when you do start building out bots, you're going to be using, at least on the Microsoft Cloud, you're going to be using Azure Bot Service, and that's where you're going to be creating your web app, connecting it to all the other services, coding it if you are going to be building, from scratch, and then you're going to be using the Microsoft Bot Framework to move forward with that. The Azure Cognitive Services that come into the play here are going to be LUIS, which is the natural language processor for kicking off actions. LUIS is short for Language Understanding Intelligent Service. And that's what's going to understand that, in the IT experience, let's say I want to reserve a laptop. I need to be able to say, I want to reserve a laptop from date 1 to date 2, right? That information is something that LUIS can take and then kick off the workflow that actually requests it, whether it puts in a ticket for it, sends a notification to the person that schedules it, adds an appointment to a calendar where the schedule is, whatever that endpoint happens to be, and runs it through that approval and comes back to the user, lets them know. So really you can't get anywhere into the action and logic space of chatbots in Azure AI without using LUIS. The knowledge side is QnA Maker. QnA Maker at its simplest is just a collection of different questions and their answers. A number of different ways to ask one question and the answer being provided by some subject matter expert someplace and upkept as you move forward. Now, when you get into the actionable aspect of this, this is where the whole web app portion comes in. You're going to be either custom coding this because it is an actual custom application, just like any other app that you might build out there. It just doesn't have a GUI. The GUI is going to be the chat box, or it's going to be the text messaging experience. You don't have to build a GUI for this. When you're going to spend your time in other applications building out GUIs, instead here, it's natural language. That's going to be your GUI, which is going to be a lot more nuanced, believe it or not. So that whole natural language thing, you really do have to do a lot of testing and make sure that you think about how people are going to ask for things or request things. Now, the custom coding is not new. People already know these languages. They're good to go. The platform that I work on, AtBot, we happen to connect to Power Automate in the Power Platform, artist formerly known as Microsoft Flow. And we also connect to Logic Apps based on you actually can get some better pricing deals by using Logic Apps sometimes because of the licensing model within Power Automate and making it user-based. But this is pretty standard here. You're going to be looking at natural language for kicking off the action, build out that logic, and then have some knowledge management attached to it as well. When it comes to deploying your bot, you got a couple different options. There's sort of two different motifs here. The first is going to be the internal authenticated bot. That means that when you go to the bot knows who you are. You're logged in with your Office 365 account, and the bot knows everything about you, from Microsoft Graph, from Azure Active Directory. So it knows your, let's say something as simple as your phone number or, what office you sit at. But it can also know who your closest colleagues are based on your emails back and forth and your Teams messages back and forth. And then you would have access to anything in, let's say, the Graph, Delve, things like that. And when you do roll these out, generally speaking, Microsoft Teams is going to be the first place you'll see them, but that doesn't mean it's the only place you can put them. So if Teams is not something that you've really jumped onto hardcore yet, if you're using SharePoint for an internal or for an intranet, you can use that as well. We also see it being used a lot in Dynamics 365. So basically any web app that is going to be part of the Office 365 or Microsoft 365 solution and has you log in, you can drop that bot in with just a little bit of JavaScript, make that part of the experience, and have people use that as part of their job description or access point. Now, on the other side of things is the external experience. So Azure offers the ability for you to drop your bot into, say, like a website. That would also include a mobile application, since they're basically just wrapped websites. That can also even be into a portal where somebody logs in. It's not technically an authenticated experience. It is still the user as far as the bot is concerned. It's just a random IP address. But there's a lot of options for this. So this is the one that you would see on a website for marketing leads or for providing customer support or tech support. You can also plug into a couple different social media tools using the Azure Bot Service channels. And then SMS is fantastic because this basically can give you now a central place to be sending text message notifications as you see fit. And instead of just getting, think about the times when you get a text message from your from UPS or FedEx or something like that, and it says press 1 to, for help and press 2 to stop. Well, maybe I don't want to just press 1 or 2. Maybe I don't want help or stop. Maybe I want to reschedule that delivery. Or instead of picking up my prescription tomorrow, I want to pick it up on Monday. So being able to come back and say, actually, can I reschedule that? And the bot being able in the background to know and be able to kick off and say, yes, let's go do that. So as sort of central spot, Microsoft Teams is going to be that place, though, that you're going to see it, especially for use in education, I think, because Teams is becoming such a hit in the EDU space. Now, if we jump into this and show off a little bit of how this kind of stuff works, you can find the resource here and get any sort of videos you want that I'm going to be showing. There's also some hidden slides in this, and the slides are shared internally, so you can grab these, and there's a link at the end you can see. But I want to run through an actual example here. So let's say we have a student that wants to ask some questions nearing the end of the semester, wants to find out when final exams are, when he's going to have to hand in his assignments. And you can see we're getting some questions out here. When do final exams begin? How long can I register for spring classes? And then how many assignments do I have left, right? So these have started out with knowledgeable questions, so QnA Maker, but then the assignments is getting a pull. It's a specific thing to the user. So this student has a number of assignments due, including having a final exam scheduled. And these pieces of information are being pulled directly from Canvas, the LMS. Now, it could be any LMS, doesn't matter, as long as you can connect through the API. Clicking a button can bring you in and showing you actually what's right in there, but you can get this information still in Teams. You can brand these adaptive cards, that's what these are called, these little cards, make them a really pleasant experience. And then go forward, the student here might want to go out and study a little bit, find out what time the library is open till, and can he get some additional support from his professor and get the schedule for when they have the office hours. So a lot of opportunity there, reasonably simple example. So let's talk about what the tools were in the background. QnA Maker, as I said, is that knowledge source. So most of those back and forths that you saw were QnA Maker. And essentially you're looking at how many different ways can you seed the knowledge base with the phrasings of what people are going to use. So in this case, you can see what time does the library close? When does the library open? What are the library operating hours? They all essentially mean the same thing. So if you can provide those phrasings, you can then have that one standard answer that's accurate. If the schedule for the library was a little bit more complex than just every day it's open 8 to 10, you can have this in a list someplace and have the workflow reach out and ping the lists and say, okay, you asked about schedules on Tuesdays, the schedule on Tuesday is this. Or based on today, here's the schedule for today. So those were where the knowledgeable answers came from. When it came to kicking off the process and looking up the assignments, this is what Lewis looks like. Again, just a bunch of different ways to ask the same thing. This is the kind of stuff that you seed ahead of time. There's not a whole lot of information out there that's provided for you. So you can't walk into Lewis and just say, let's just use it starting now. You do have to assign or set up your intent structure. So each intent is assigned to a specific workflow to go kick off the process of getting more input, that kind of stuff. This was a simple example though. Lewis is super powerful. You can get to the point where it can take in what are called entities. So in this example, we have, I want to take vacation time, October 18th to the 22nd. The adaptive card that came back can automatically be pre-filled based on the fact that my natural language told me I wanted to take vacation time, not sick time, and date 1 to date 2. So if you can be as specific as possible with the bot, Lewis can actually pull that information and automatically run with it, which is really, really cool. Now, the workflow that ran this in the background was actually in Power Automate. It was triggered by Lewis. And if I jump into the actual workflow here and show you what it looks like, you'll see there's not that many steps. There's a little variable here for getting the assignments from Canvas. I wanted to find out the user's name so I could use their first name whenever I reference them. And then you'll see it just used an HTTP call to go over to Canvas, get the information about the student and their listing of courses and homework assignments, and then came back and created a new adaptive card for every single assignment that they had there. Now that could have been shown as the carousel, which is what we did. You'll see at the end here, we sent this out as a carousel option, but you can also send it through Microsoft Teams as a tab. So the tab has a listing of everything. Each one is its own card, which is actually really, really useful. So reasonably simple way to get a pretty complex piece of data coming through. You'll see that once I went through and actually got the information from Canvas, I can drop in actual data from Canvas in the adaptive card. So they're all created ahead of time and ready to go. Now, one other really cool example I want to show here, really just for inspiration, is coming from David Kellerman from the engineering school at the University of South Wales in Sydney. I went to engineering school. I can totally relate to his demo here that he gave at Inspire 2019. Most people watching this, or if you're in the EDU space and you pay attention to the Microsoft cloud space, this is probably not news to you, but this demonstration was just a really, really cool thing. So he's kind of become the de facto standard bearer for hyper-modern classroom in the Microsoft Cloud. And while he's expert at putting Office 365 apps to use, I mean, even beyond what many are doing today, he's using Teams for collaboration, communication, getting questions answered. He's doing all of his notes in OneNote, so the OneNote notebook is shared with everybody. PowerPoint presentation for his presentations, Stream for his lecture recordings, which is a really big win there, frankly, and then Forms for building quizzes. It's really his most innovative solution has been building out a helper chatbot to supplement any TA support for answering student questions. So using bot service, Lewis, QnA Maker, all of which we've talked about, and actually a pretty slick Azure machine learning model, which actually is really not that difficult to get into. The bot at this point has learned over the course of the semester what the answers to questions are. And these are reasonably technical questions, like these are engineering questions, all based on what the previous answers coming from the TAs have been and from the stream lecture videos, because they're all automatically transcribed. So the bot's actually been beating the TAs to the punch with accurate answers, including timestamp links to the lecture recordings, which is very similar to like when you Google something and it pops up with a couple seconds in a YouTube video that it thinks is right. It's basically that same feature, and really keeps students moving on their studies. So the bot's been even more, and as you build the bots out and they learn more, they're going to become that much more adept over time. Now, I had a couple examples in here I wanted to show. The first one, again, as an engineering student, I would never ask the question, what is Newton's second law? But it does show you the value here where you can get a very quick answer coming from the bot and send a link to a resource, be able to review the answer and say whether it was good or not. But what was really useful was this one. This is an example where he shows an actual problem that was assigned to the students. His class is 500 people or more sometimes. So being able to sort of automate this is really, really useful. This is what's called a free body diagram. Figures out which forces are affecting each of the beams in here, so later on you could design the beams so they don't break, right? He has the ability here through this bot to respond to the student by saying, okay, it looks like you're working on this question, come up with the graphic for it, and then run them through either the whole solution or just show them the answer so they can check their work. Now that may seem sort of counterproductive from a homework standpoint, but coming from engineering school, actually it is really useful because it's not about the answer for us, it's more about the solution, but it doesn't have to be just this way. So I just thought that that was a really cool example, very, very inspirational, and it's not nearly as hard as you might think it is to build some of the stuff that he has out there, and he's using all these tools that I've already covered today. So kind of closing out here, if you want to look for some more information, it's not just about that helper bot with the students, it's also about information management. I have some resources on this you can take a look at it afterwards. But bots are now being added to basically what we've had for decades, which is sites, libraries, plus enterprise search. And now bots are sort of getting people from point A to point B without there being any sort of unpredictability of search and without having to need some Rand McNally roadmap to get to the third level folder within a 50 sites that I happen to follow. So it's a really, really cool thing in that respect. And if you have further further curiosity about the cognitive services in general, sort of a sister situation to the periodic table of Office 365 is this Azure Cognitive Services table. Definitely check that out. And again, be aware that you're kind of walking into a paradigm now, whether you like it or not, that is changing. A new generation is coming in that is just so used to talking to their phone. And it's going to become an expectation because sort of the next step within human-machine interactions. So with that, I'll list some resources here, and if there's any questions, feel free to speak up.
Now I have to come off mute. We have a couple of questions. Really great session, right? So I look at all this stuff, and just about everybody's a little bit smarter than I am many days. So I know you made some statements around you're a programmer, you're not a coder. Is that really true? Can we really, how easy is it to start down this road in terms of, how long does it take to do a basic chatbot?
So it really comes down to, what's your goal? If you want to start out with that FAQ bot, that is super simple. There are plenty of videos out there on YouTube that do the, build an FAQ bot in 10 minutes. As long as you have access to the Azure portal, you are able to build that out. And I was not somebody who ever played with Azure before, so I just kind of told myself, don't look around in here because I feel like I don't belong. Just to click the buttons that you're only supposed to click. It really comes down to everybody knows their own language, right? If you know language, you can provide the questions and then the resources and the answers afterwards. When it does get a little bit harder is the workflow aspect. And for me, the Power Automate connection is really good. And that's not going to be 100% of people. But Microsoft is pushing super hard on Power Platform adoption and, having a bunch of basic level intros to connections, things like that. And it's definitely doable as long as you're okay with a little bit of, especially if you want to connect to one of those third-party apps, a little bit of JSON here and there, which I realize that I say counts as code. A lot of coders will say it doesn't, but it definitely is. As long as you're willing to play around with a little bit of that, or taking some other solutions and like tweaking them to your needs, it's totally doable.
Awesome. Hey, so can you turn on your video real quick? Just I think everybody can see the PowerPoint.
Okay.
So when I think about levels of complexity, right? Power Automate, what used to be called Flow, right?
Yep.
We at Microsoft love changing names to things, right?
Yes, you
Right
do.
about the time we have it all figured out. So, where have you worked with a customer in terms of, like what kind of level of complexity can we really get to in terms of a process or a function where you've deployed a chatbot?
Sure. So right now I'm working on one that for a client of ours that you can't really get more complex than trying to navigate through the Medicare system.
I
So,
would agree.
yep. So basically, what we're putting together is a way to give a personalized recommendation to a user or a potential lead on what they should be doing to move forward with their Medicare application. So this is a tree that there's got to be 1,000 steps in it. Now, not 1,000 that you go through in every branch, but one branch might have 30 questions. So the ability to bounce around and do whatever you need to. There's more if statements or conditionals, switch cases, and apply to each kind of statements in this thing. It gets really complex, but Power Automate works. It will take a very big workflow and have no problem with it. In fact, the mind mapping tool that we used takes like 3 or 4 minutes to load by itself, but Power Automate, no problem, opens right up. And
That's awesome. That's awesome. And is there any communities or anything? I know you put a couple things in the chat. In the chat. So that'll exist in the channel forever for MS Office Hours. What communities do you find are super helpful in terms of if I'm just starting to do this, or places we can go?
Yeah, so for me, the biggest one's going to be the Power Users community that Microsoft supports for the Power Platform. I think it's just called Power Automate Community or Power Apps Community, but it used to be the Power Users, and I think people still call it that. Generally, there are just a bunch of people that work on Power Automate on there all the time. I've got to know a bunch of the MVPs that work in that space, and they are just fantastic. I don't know why people like helping people so much sometimes, because just the amount of questions and answers they go through is fantastic. I also hang out on the Microsoft Flow subreddit on Reddit, so there's a lot of questions and answers you'll see there. But
Reddit, you are even cooler than I ever thought of being, right? I actually started using Reddit because my 20-year-old told me about it.
Yeah.
So when I think about these things and kind of where we've interacted, and I've set up some chat bots, and again, I did some programming back in the day in languages that are things that you've probably never touched, like COBOL and Fortran and
engineering
Pascal.
still uses Fortran because it's the most efficient programming language out there.
Is it really? That's amazing.
Insane.
So if I ever get in trouble at Microsoft, I still have a small potential of having a career in coding for Fortran. So hey, anyways, so I set up a small thing that just helps with Teams, like and just some basic Q&A, right? So there was a bot or something out on GitHub. I think you've put a chat bot out on GitHub as well. Is that correct?
So it's not on GitHub. It's just you can just grab workflows. Actually, you don't need them. They're just zips.
Okay, great. And those are those out on GitHub?
We have them just on our blog. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So go to your blog.
Yeah, exactly.
There's also some chatbots out on GitHub that I know that we've done. So I was able to get it up and running in about 30 minutes, right? Just some basic stuff. I had maybe 15, 20 questions that I loaded in my demo environment.
Yep.
People don't want me demoing, by the way, that often. I'm not, again, I know where my ineptitude starts at.
Sure.
So a lot of times, right, I think about things like recruitment. I think about things like help desks. I think about what other areas, those are financial aid, right? So I've seen a lot of use cases for that. There was a customer of ours that implemented a chatbot when they were rolling out Teams, right? They were in Microsoft 365 and they had an email up there, and they had done some other stuff. And I kept talking with, yourself and Stephen Lane and Preston, who showed up a little bit today.
Yep.
Don't forget to send your emails to Preston about asking about Microsoft licensing. I love that. And they rolled out Teams, and as part of that effort, they rolled out chatbot with it. And they only had about maybe 20 calls, and this was a very large organization, greater than 10,000 people that moved to Teams. And the chatbot, did the Q&A, right? For, hey, how do I do this? How do I do that?
Yeah.
And they had, maybe 15 or 20 calls over the first 2 days about how to do things in Teams, so this enterprise-wide deployment.
Yeah.
And then the next step they did was they started doing it for their help desk, right?
Sure.
So it built a knowledge base. It continued to grow, and it actually got better over time. And they reduced their help desk calls by over 50%.
Yeah,
Right?
no surprise there. So one of the things that we did for AtBot is we're on a freemium model. So the free version, if you go into the Teams App Store right now, you can find the pink free version of our bot. And that actually, when you install that, that does Teams help. Now, back in the day, Microsoft Teams used to have a helper bot called Tbot. He was somewhat unceremoniously retired a couple of years ago, and we thought that doesn't make sense. Like, we should be using the technology that's part of this system and platform to promote itself, right? So we put that out there as a way to introduce people to this help mechanism there, and you can add a couple flows for free, no big deal. And then if you like it, okay, you go onto the premium model. But that's the thing, is we've seen a lot of success with that. And when you get into the premium side for us, we'll just give you that knowledge base because you want to be able to customize it, right? You want it to be specific to your instance, the way you rolled it out, what license you're on, all that kind of stuff. But people like it a lot.
So I just got a text from Preston saying that several people have taken me up on my offer of free license Q&A from Preston. So well done, community. Matt,
He will
this was
never
great.
sleep. He will never sleep again.
He's never leaving EDU, even if he went to commercial or another company, which he's not doing, just commercial, which is almost a different land than EDU. But anyways, this was awesome, Matt. Really appreciate it. I'm going to post this up on our YouTube channel. Feel free to, if you have questions, ask Matt directly. He shared his email
Yeah, definitely.
address, shared his Twitter, whatever else we have going on. But this was really great, Matt. Really appreciate it. I'm going to end the recording right now. So give me 1 sec.
Perfect. And thank you again for having me.